This meeting is being recorded.
Hi everyone and welcome to Terf Talk Downunder. I'm Angela and this is Jasmine. How you going, Jazz?
Hi Ange, good. Yeah, ready for another Terf Talk Downunder?
Yes, it's 3 in 7 days, so it's been busy.
bit tie. You might need a bit of a nana nap after this one, hey?
Yeah, we had to have an impromptu episode on Sunday because of the Steve Austin ABC radio scandal and all the misinformation that was travelling around at the time.
Yeah.
So Sally set the record straight. And that episode ended up being very popular with the trans activists because they were all yabbering about it. For people who claim that we talk crap and that our channel's amateurish and shit, they're all watching us. So there you go. Hi, trans activists. So it's been a bit of a slow news week this week, but there's been a few stories.
Ange, good on you for chatting to your trans activists. That's nice. Yeah.
There was, in a similar vein of, hard-hitting important news, there was a young person who was very upset that their flag had disappeared. Do you want to fill everyone in about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not sure how young Tiger Bird is, who goes by the they pronouns, but apparently he had a flag up on the fence around Albany Way in Western Australia to promote a family pride festival or day that they had coming up for little kids, complete with drag queens, of course. And he's not sure if the wind blew it off the fence or if it was a transphobic hate crime. And so he's had a bit of a whinge. The ABC of course has picked it up and been very sympathetic towards him, and also maybe it was a homophobic hate crime with this flag flying away. So Darren West, who's the local Labor MP, come to the rescue, and he's offered to pay for 4 flags.
Wow.
To replace the one flag that Mother Nature probably, made fly off the fence. But yeah, there you go. The poor Tiger Bird, a little bit upset about his flag.
I think it's more likely that one of his fellow queers has taken the flag and put it up in their lounge room. So, but the fact that the ABC will make an entire story around that, yet women impacted by self-ID in rape crisis centres and prisons and domestic violence shelters aren't worthy of an article.
Yeah, it's pretty disgraceful. It was good to see potential contender for Terf of the Week, Ange, with the Perth mums, first-time mum, 23-year-old, and she made this little TikTok video with her gorgeous little 4-month-old baby, saying that he was a he and she was going to raise him to know that there were only 2 genders. And she did a bit of a fun video, and she got 260,000 views in no time. And Yahoo Australia wrote it up as, was it a transphobic video? But the commenters were all on her side, on the side of common sense, like we are. And they did a little survey as well, which was brilliant, because 84% of the participants in the survey said that they agreed with her and they were going to raise their kids exactly the same way. So, yeah.
Speaking of all ages events.
I should say her name, sorry. Yep. Like as a nomination, Louise Barry is her name.
Louise Barry.
Shout out to Louise, bit of a legend. And she's really young, like 23, 24, she knows.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Speaking of all ages events, the Pride Centre in St Kilda tonight is having a drag queen event for 12 to 25-year-olds. And, that in itself, red flags. I mean, all of us know what the average 18 to 25-year-old is like on Twitter. They are porn sick, most of them, if they're involved in that scene. The things that they're interested in are not suitable for 12-year-olds, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, not only is that a problematic age bracket and, also promoting drag, which is adult entertainment for kids, but the Proud Boys or equivalent, or the fascists and the anti-fascists are using this event where 12-year-olds will be present to protest and counter-protest. So they're using a family-friendly drag event. They're appropriating that to have street protests where angry men will scream at each other. So when people say the left and the right are just as bad as each other, look at this. They're turning up to an event where 12-year-olds are invited to attend and having an aggressive standoff with each other. Now, I don't know any women that are attending. Yeah, anyone. I don't know.
It's government funded, isn't it? What if they've got 12-year-olds and 25-year-olds at the same social event? Like, that's statutory rape, isn't it?
The same Pride Centre that won't allow lesbians to have female-only events has, inviting children and adults to congregate together without parental supervision for a glitter, pride, drag, face painting, dress up, whatever. So, I personally would never protest at a children's hospital or outside any event where children are on the bill. Yeah, and I think it's despicable that these aggressive men are appropriating this cause, and they're blaming feminists. They're saying, oh, the TERFs are going to show up, when we've got nothing to do with it. Nothing at all. I don't know one person who's attending this apart from angry men. And so the bloody Nazi fascist scumbags made a dog whistle, and the anti-fascists ran up to that dog whistle and, basically walked into it. Any man who turns up to protest that event is a thug and a brainless idiot, regardless of what side they're on. And the fact that the anti-fascists are encouraging people to go there and counter-protest in front of families and kids is despicable. Why don't they just let drunks show up and make a fool of themselves instead of bringing other people into it? It's just disgusted with them, and how they're trying to pin it all on, TERFs because we're in with the fascists, which is the biggest load of crap I've ever heard. But anyway, that's my rant for today.
Oh no, rant away, my friend. All this toxic shit that happens on Twitter, I must say I don't really miss it since I got off. But it's all on you for keeping up the fight, my friend.
Yeah, well, speaking of, women getting wrongly aligned with the wrong sort of people. Kelly J's tour is the planning for that's coming along nicely. The end of March she'll be in Melbourne, and Melbourne will be the last spot on the tour. So we're expecting that to be quite an event if the publicity follows her around. So she's coming to Australia after IWD at the start of March. And then she'll be here until the end of March, so approximately 3 weeks, and she might be going to New Zealand too. So that's very exciting. Yeah. And the wheels are in process.
Yeah, and the other thing I just realised with the media coverage about some stuff that's going on in New South Wales is that the state election in New South Wales, I'm pretty sure, is in March. So there might be some good opportunities for her to get a bit of coverage in that context, because they're already lining it up. And Alex Greenwich MP is out and about this week talking about the tragedy of homophobia, and he means transphobia, in schools, and that whichever side gets elected in the March election, that they need to do something to be trans allies in schools. And there's this big report out from the gender, what's it called? The New South Wales Youth Advocate for Children and Young People. And
navel gazing.
What was that?
Doing some navel gazing.
Yeah, well, they've called for there being gender neutral toilets in all New South Wales government schools, and training around gender identity for all schools, including Catholic schools, which is like, I think they might be dreaming on that front. And then they've got, they did this big survey, and they reckon that 18.4 or something % of all young people identify as a member of the LGBTIA plus Q ... whatever community. So, you know, I don't know how we went from, what was it, 5% or 10% that were, you know, same-sex attracted to now 18% with all the other letters of the alphabet, but it doesn't really ring true to me.
Well, they've got, at my daughter's school, they've got male toilets, female toilets, and an additional toilet for anyone who wants to go to a unisex toilet.
Yeah, right.
And I'm okay with that.
Does it say unisex on it?
Yes. So there's male toilets, female toilets, and unisex. So at my daughter's school, then any child whose gender doesn't match, you know, their sex in their brain can go to the unisex toilet.
Yeah, I'm okay with that as well. And that's actually what the building code says. So, you know, it's ridiculous that we have all of these arguments, you know.
It is.
Yeah. And then the other thing, in New Zealand, the Sports New Zealand, following on the lead of Sports Australia a few years back, have put out their transgender inclusion guidelines, which wonder what they do. Who do they exclude from women's sports? So, yeah, obviously that's super disappointing, that they don't think women are worthy of their own single sex category. So, yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Bad move, New Zealand government.
It is. And they're going to make fools of themselves, because, you know, people can see, particularly in cycling, in surfing, in all of these sports, men are absolutely dominating, and people can see the injustice of it. So, you know, they're making fools of themselves.
Yeah, they are. You're right, Ange. It's so unpopular as well. This is the thing. Every single survey that's done, everyone's wildly on our side. Like, Terf's always right, as we know. So, yeah.
However, the media is still completely captured. But Bernard Lane apparently did an article, about how people are beginning to speak up. Not here in Australia, but overseas, some of the mainstream media is allowing both sides of the debate to be represented. Yeah,
in Quillette. And he spoke about a big piece in the New York Times and another one in The Guardian. So, you know, both sides of the Atlantic, and that they're just finally starting to question the safety and ethics of gender clinics, particularly child gender clinics. And it's a really thoughtful piece, actually, like for people like you and me who rage at the imbalance in media coverage. It really helps to, unpack why it is that journalists seem to be so biased. And, he actually, he explains that it's really hard as a journalist to write about this topic because they've got, the other side have got very established networks of, almost like a queer editorial panel within the news agency that, when you pitch a story, it'll get, people will look at you sideways like you're transphobic or, and as we know, a lot of the journalists who have written stories about this end up getting a complaint to the Press Council in Australia. So there's actually, the journalists who have written about it at all deserve our profound thanks, because it's really bad for your career to write about this topic. So,
Bernard Lane is going to be revered as a whistleblower and a hero. Mark my words, he will. And look at what they did to Steve Austin.
Yeah,
not only they protect the person. Well, he was instructed to take his Twitter account down. So they're looking at whether the things he's been accused of were set up by this trio of trans rights activists, or whether their claims that he had been looking at this particular genre of pornography for 3 years on his work account true.
I don't think so.
To me, very, very unlikely. But I'm still so incensed by the fact that The Guardian sullied this man's reputation based on the tweets of a known troll who has a history of cancellation.
Yeah.
And they refuse to platform women with genuine concerns about self-ID, and yet they listen to troll. And what happens if you give trolls a platform? Then you're emboldening the trolls. So one of the other trolls involved in this scandal against Steve Austin has been platformed by the Greens, Janet Wright.
Yeah.
And this man has a nappy fetish, and he's a troll, and he's just gross. And the Greens are giving him a platform. He spoke at the inquiry he spoke to them about self-ID, but he's also apparently championing for them to raise unemployment benefits and, welfare payments, which is a legitimate cause. But a diaper-wearing online troll who identifies as a woman and looks nothing like one, really?
Honestly, I just don't cope with the diaper wearing. I'm just not coping. Like, some things we just do not need to know about. And, with a consenting adult, just please don't talk about it. How disgusting. He's all over the internet. Oh my God.
His other mates are just disgusting too. And their whole life revolves around trying to platform women that don't believe men are women. Their whole life revolves around it. They even sit through this channel where, why would you, really? This channel was only ever intended for our mates. So, we already thought 10, 15 people would watch it. It was intended for our mates. So the fact that they sit through it.
Yeah. All right. So we've got a special guest for you this week, who's a mum who has really been to hell and back with her daughter, and lives in Melbourne, so is really on the front line of the gender wars being waged against our children at the Royal Children's Hospital. So, Monica, thank you so much for joining us today. We have obviously given you an assumed name, and also won't be showing your face today, because we understand what courage it takes, especially in Victoria with the draconian conversion and suppression laws, which have made protecting our children a crime incredibly. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi, Monica.
Hi.
Bless you, my friend, in a non-religious way. So you tell us a little bit about your daughter and your experiences with her. How old was she when you first realised that there was a problem?
Can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
Okay. So just a bit of background, was always the toddler that would cry if couldn't be in a skirt or in the favourite colour. And even my mother-in-law says to me, she would say, Kurt, I need a Kurt, meaning a skirt, just before she could even talk. Was always dressing up. She had been assessed as being verbally gifted, but she couldn't sort of express her feelings very well. So she always had not a bit of a temper, but if she couldn't do something as well as she could verbalise, she would throw, like a jigsaw puzzle, say she couldn't do it, so she'd throw it across the room, because communicating with adults was very easy, but doing a puzzle wasn't. So she was very frustrated. So I was aware that there were some issues there. And over time, it sort of didn't seem to affect her learning, though she was slow to read and write, which surprised me because she was very bright. But I'd since found out that she had eyesight problems, which I kind of fixed too late. Even though she'd had her eyes tested, they weren't educational optometrists. So apparently there's a different way of seeing letters if they're looking for it. And that's what she was diagnosed with just recently. So her schooling did suffer, but she was always happy and healthy. And it wasn't till she got to about year 8. So she would have been about 13, I would say. And I had one of her teachers contact me because they were concerned that she wasn't doing her homework. And I was like, oh, that's not like her. So I got in touch with her, I think at school or somewhere. I think mobile phones were just allowed back then. And I said, what's going on, mate? Why are you not, handing in your homework? And she just yelled into the phone and said the teacher can get effed, but used the F word, which I'd never heard her use before. And she said, and by the way, I'm gay. And I said, I'm coming to get you from school right now. And I said, it's not about the gay bit, it's about the way that you've just spoken, because that's not like you. And I know that there's something wrong. So that's when it started. And from there, sorry, I'm getting all teary.
It's all right. Take your time, darling heart.
She'd, like, I think, there was a grade 6 or year 7, she liked a boy at school and he was leaving, and so she wanted to sort of hang out with him or go on a little date before he left school. And he told the teacher to tell her to leave him alone. So she got dragged into the teacher's office and was told to stop harassing this boy. Then I think year 7, so it was about 12 months before all this happened, she had this other little boyfriend, and they were sitting on the school bus going on excursion, and other boys were making sexual gestures at them. And she was so mortified. She came home and she said, I'm not that kind of girl. I don't want people to think that that's who I am. And I went back to the school and was, because there was a teacher on the bus and didn't put a stop to it, just kids being kids or whatever. But she just started to change after that. And I didn't know that she was seeing the school counsellor. And it wasn't until somebody that I know was a school counsellor at another school and knew that I was having issues with my child. And she said to me that my school's counsellor had rung her to get advice on what to do. And she said...
About your daughter?
Yes. And she said, I think it was about yours. So this particular person at school had no idea how to handle anything, because my daughter had gone to her and said that she was trans, and handed her the brochure to the Royal Children's Hospital Gender Clinic. So when this all came out, I just didn't know what to do. The first thing I thought was, well, I've got to go along with this. I've got to support my child. And I said, I'll see what I can do. And I found some really good psychologists and psychiatrists. And every time we'd go to one, they wouldn't affirm her back then. So she didn't like them anymore. So we'd go to another one and then another one. And in the interim, because she was given this brochure to the Royal Children's Hospital, I thought, well, I'll give them a ring and just see what it's all about, because this was all new to me too. I, had no idea what all this meant, really. I mean, of course I knew what a transgender person was, but as far as kids thinking this way, it was, from another world, really. Yeah. So I rang the Royal Children's Hospital Gender Clinic, and it was really quite a weird response. First of all, I was told that the waiting list was 2 years, and I said, what do schools do? Like, how do we, do we go on school holidays and does she come back as a boy? And they said, it takes longer than that because I've got to change all the toilets around. There's lots that a school has to do. You've got to give them 12 months and stuff. I said, okay, right, this is a learning process for me. And I said, but how do we know? I said, I've taken her to lots of counselling and they don't think it's her destiny, is my words. And I said, like, if I bring her in, if we go on the waiting list, I said, do you do a thorough psychological appraisal and things like that? And they said, no, that's up to the parents to get done before you come here. Wow. And I said, so how do we know that this is a real thing, that they're really trans and not just a psychological issue. And she said, if the child says they're trans, then they are. And that was the response I got from the so-called world leading clinic. So
and that was like, not to give too much away, Monica, but that was at least 5 years ago. Is that right?
So year 8, year 89.
I'm
Just 5 years, last 5 years, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So the red flag started going off, and I'm like, nah, I'm not having a bar of this. And that's when I started to do a lot more research, and found her a therapist that could try and help her see where this was all coming from. And that's when I joined a lot of the groups and made friends with a lot of other mums who had been through it and got spat out the other end. So we've been treading water for years. There's been ups and downs, and I had a big talk and said, please don't do anything until, you're in your 20s, when your brain's fully developed. And, we've had discussions and chats. And then one of her good friends, I found out, was on testosterone a few years ago. They would have been under 18 at the time. And when I caught up with that person, I sort of said, I don't like your voice. It's not you anymore. And it was my way of, fighting back without being too horrible. That person has since set up a GoFundMe page and raised the funds to have a double mastectomy. And they've only just turned 20.
And was she at your daughter's school, Monica, or your daughter?
They met, I don't even know how they met. Different sides of the city too.
Right.
Just, I think a lot of these children, they used to meet. They used to call it the Hill, which was a part, I don't even know where it is, a part of the city, where all these sort of kids would all meet up and get to know one another. And then with social networks and social media, I guess there were probably groups that they could join if they were feeling a certain way. And then they'd sort of, all these alternative kids would all meet up and that sort of thing. So, and I know that one that she met up with ended up being at the same school, because we went to lots of different schools. And then when I was on the Royal Children's Hospital website, I noticed that particular friend was actually one of the spokespeople on the website. So that freaked me out. She doesn't see that one anymore, which is good. But then, as I say, she moved out of home last year, went and lived with the boyfriend, who is they, so not but they. He likes to wear dresses and things. Apparently they knew each other, but they actually met on a dating site for alternative couples. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, he doesn't live far from us, so but we had offered, we have an apartment in the city that was vacant at the time, and so we offered that to them to live in there together, and they accepted that. And so we moved all their furniture in, hired trucks, whatever. Then they changed their mind, so then we had to move everything out and then get a tenant. And we just never said no to anything, because we just wanted to be supportive in that parental way, because we didn't support the transgender side of things. And we kind of had an agreement that I don't like what you're doing, I won't support it, but I'm still here. And I thought we were getting through. I had some breakthrough moments, and I thought that we were nearly, I was positive that I was going to get out the other side of it. Photos on Instagram that people showed me of her in a bikini at the beach, with the friend with the double mastectomy. So you could see their scars, hairy chest and in boardies, and she was standing next to them in a bikini. So I thought, well, you know, that's a good sign. So I'd get all these hopes, you know, like that maybe we were growing out of it. And she still bought dresses and skirts and girly things, but I've since been told that that's how you present, whether you present feminine or male, is not your sexuality or your gender.
Yeah.
So I get very confused. And so, yeah, so she's been out of home for probably 2 years now, or coming up to 2 years, maybe not quite. I lose track. One of my other children did say it's a lot calmer in the house. There's no fights. And it's not that we were fighting, but there was just a lot of moods, I think. A lot of, you know, trying to keep everybody happy, you know.
So, Monica, did you support your daughter's change of name, or did you keep calling her?
I have told her that I will not call her chosen name.
Yeah.
And
And
did the school oppose you in that, Monica? I think, like, did some of the schools call her boy name?
Yes, they did. And one of them rang me to talk about my child and used her chosen name. And I said, I beg your pardon, who are you talking about? I don't have that. It's not my child.
Yeah.
And yeah, I let them have it. But
such liars. I don't know if you want to comment on that at all, but I mean, they've just said, and the ABC RMIT just did a fact check, that, you know, government schools are not socially transitioning children at school, but they fucking are, sorry to swear, and they were 4 years ago. Yeah, before absolutely. The suppression and conversion legislation came in, you know.
Well, yeah, for them to ring me and say about your child Beep, and I'm like, let's say Brad, your child Brad, and I'm like, hang on a minute, I have a daughter. I don't have a son called Brad. You know, and then I put in writing that all of their school paperwork, reports, everything has to be in her birth name. I demanded that. I said, I'm the parent. I said, you are merely teaching my child and looking after my child between the hours of 8 and 4. I said, and so I say, this is what needs to go on the documentation, and I don't want to hear any more about it. And I told them off, and that's what happened. So they changed it. I said, I'm happy for you to use the preferred name in class because I need my child to go to school. So if that means that, you know, she'll get through the day, then that's what I want. But I said, when you're talking to me or my husband or any of my family or anything written, it's to be in the birth name. And yeah, and they did.
It's your understanding from the support groups that you're in with other mums like you, Monica, that's not something that mums can demand anymore, that, you know.
Look, from what I can tell, and I do worry about my younger one, who I could say could be led one way or the other. She's actually at a private school, and they had a transgender awareness week, and you could buy badges and lanyards and anything you wanted. And I did contact the school over that one. I spoke to the teacher whose name was on the documentation, and I explained to him the situation. I said, it's not always this fairy tale that you're making it out to be. I said, there's so many families hurting and falling apart because of this. It's ripping families apart because you want to support your child, but it's like, I wouldn't let somebody inject rat poison into my child. Why would I allow them, you know, to think that it's okay to put testosterone into them? And that's now what's happened with mine. I've found out that she is actually now on testosterone, and that she's, this quote, I've never been so happy in my life, Mum. It's like the kid that got the candy because you just weren't allowed to have it for all those years. It's no, and now you've got it. And my worry is it's not going to change anything, you know, that your partner's still depressed and you're still living under his parents' roof and you don't like them, and, you know, you're still working a low-paid job to get by because you dropped out of uni, and it's not going to fix anything. And this is the thing, and this is what I was saying to the school, and I said, you've put your name to this stuff, and I said, you know that overseas, especially in America and the UK, that clinics are closing down and people that run them and put their names to things are being sued. And I said, I'm not threatening you, I'm just saying, because I like you as a person, that just to be very careful what you put your name to for future. And he actually stopped and said, actually, yeah, you're right, I never thought of that.
Even the Cass report from the UK recommended no social transition. So the schools are acting very, very irresponsibly.
Well, they are, because they're, you know, they're allowing it. You know, another private school that one of my children was at, I saw a boy in a dress, and I mentioned that to somebody, and they said, oh, it was probably just for muck-up day. And I said, no, he was in year 11.
Yeah.
And I spoke to that school too. My kids have had 3 kids at 3 different schools at one stage, so that's why it gets a bit confusing. And I spoke to the principal, and I said, you're letting these kids in prep and grade 1, because it's a kindergarten to year 12 school, they're seeing this, and you've got posters up. I said, do you not think that that's making them wonder what the hell's going on?
Yeah,
and he said, he's like, oh no, but he's in the senior school. And I said, but the senior school boys and the junior kids, they all mix in the same areas. They all walk past this. It's a very small school. It's not really segregated. The little people see the big people all the time. And you just get fobbed off that I got told our hands are tied. We're just following the Safe Schools program, or whatever the hell it is that they sprout, that they're following curriculum guidelines and mandates when they teach stuff and all this sort of stuff. And I did stop my youngest going to every Thursday. They had this Elephant Ed thing, and you know, they had sexuality and gender and all these different things. And she knows it all. I didn't want her to go and I wanted to sort of make a stand to her to say, look, I don't agree with this stuff that they're putting into your head, because they think young people think it's okay. They think there's nothing wrong with it, and just let them be, and, you know, that nobody cares anymore. And, you know, like, they're not going to be bullied or anything. No one cares. And this is one thing I said.
Magic cure.
Oh, absolutely. And I said this to the principal at the one school. I said, these kids don't need all this awareness anymore. I said, they need help. They need psychological help, and they need to get through it. I said, the fat kids are still getting teased. The kids with red hair are still getting teased. The girls that don't, the girls with the glasses, all of those kids, all those bigger minority groups or smaller minority groups.
Like they always have been, like your daughter was on the bus.
Yeah. There's still all that nastiness going on, and all these kids that are being bullied online and they commit suicide. And I said, no, these trans kids have got more friends than they ever knew what to do with. They've never been so popular. And it's true. I mean, I know with mine, like on one of these social media platforms when she announced it, and, oh, you're so brave, and, oh, you know, we want to congratulate you, and, oh, blah, 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 and come to this party and come to that party. And I'm like, what the, you know.
Monica, is there anything that you would have done differently if you'd had your time over? Like, would you have sort of gone along with it? Or, you know, what would you recommend to other parents who've had the experience where their child's come home and said, I am trans?
What would I do? First of all, I guess don't let it get to that point. I was very lenient with social media and you know, doing what you want and being free and all that sort of stuff. As long as you're polite, let me know where you were, and, you know, then they had a pretty good childhood doing whatever they wanted. And I think that's the problem, is that maybe I was just too lenient and too letting them be free and not monitoring enough. However, my daughter did say to one of her counsellors that I was too much of a helicopter parent, and that she needed to find her own way, which is exact contrast to what I thought I was doing as a parent. So perhaps I needed to show more discipline or more rules. We pretty much don't have any rules in our house. As I say, as long as they're polite and respectful and do what they need to do. And my mum had said to me when my eldest was a baby, that kid has you wrapped around her little finger. Mm-hmm. And I never really thought about it much. I used to think, oh, yeah, well, she's my child. And, she was a hip baby because I couldn't put her down because she would cry. And, I would take her to sleep school because I couldn't get her to sleep. And I'd have to sing to her in the car to get her to calm down. And I never let her suffer. She never had to cry for anything or suffer. And if there was problems at school, Mum would get in there and fix it. And I don't know whether or not that somehow has created a way of thinking that in her mind that, I can do whatever I want and there's no consequences.
I think it's cultural.
Like, I wouldn't blame yourself. I think if you look at, Ange and I are both going to furiously agree with each other now. Like, if you look at like Stuart, what's his name? What's the trans man? Stuart Nugent, is it?
Scott.
Yeah, Scott.
35.
Scott, right. Yeah, Scott Nugent. I mean, he makes the point that he was 42, and a mother in a lesbian relationship, and it got him, so.
Yes, I read his story about
her. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I definitely wouldn't blame yourself, and I mean, I think, in 2017, 18, before, Kira Bell had come out, before all of this understanding about, girls being the primary audience presenting to gender clinics, there wasn't the awareness back then. So for you to have the strength of character as a mother to say no to your daughter, I take my hat off to you. And
I think too,
what I would do too.
I think as sort of Generation X parents like myself, we grew up with the tough love of the getting whacked around if you did the wrong thing. And I think we're a generation of parents who don't want to be like our parents. We can't and don't want to use actual, physical violence to discipline our children. But at the same time as we've stopped using old-fashioned levels of discipline, this, me generation has come up through online culture where these kids feel entitled, and you're trying to set boundaries with your kids. And like you said, they tell you to get fucked and there's no consequences, because if you try and keep them at home in their room, they'll accuse you of child abuse and tell the school that that's what you're doing. So, there's this whole bunch of different things that are enabling this external social contagion to come into our homes late at night and take our children away. So don't ever blame yourself for this. I think it's a combination of factors. And particularly 5 years ago, there wasn't this groundswell of people who understood what was going on. So you putting your faith in the gender clinic or in clinicians is completely understandable. We would all do that, 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's only now that there's some pushback that you have alternatives like social groups and that you've been able to meet other parents who've gone through this. And I guess all your journeys have probably been different too.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, one thing my daughter did say to me was like, I just don't feel that I fit in with this private school, tall, skinny, blonde hair. And I'm looking at it going, but you are tall, skinny, beautiful and got blonde, curly hair. What are you talking about? Whether it was a money, because we might not have had the same amount of money, I don't know. But one thing that did keep me going was my GP, and she still doesn't agree with it, and told me to fight it.
Yeah.
So, but one thing, the saddest thing about all this is that my daughter, now that she's got her way and she's on her testosterone, is actually being nice to me. And I said to her, do you know that you're actually being nice to me now? And she said, yeah, that's because because now I'm doing what I want to do and you didn't want me to. So now I'll be nice to you.
But in 7 years' time, if she goes on to have these procedures, when she finally realizes that it wasn't the great save all that they expect, that's the most dire time for people who are transgender, the post-operative period, when they've taken the process as far as they can and they're still not obviously the opposite sex.
Well, they never will
be able to say, yeah, you will be there. I would much rather that you stood your ground than have your child come to you years from now and say, why did you let me do this?
Yeah, I mean, that's, and then these are the arguments that I've had with her. And I've said, look, if you were burnt to a crisp in a fire and all they had was your DNA, I said, it's going to say that you're a female. Yeah. And I said, no amount of surgery or sticking yourself with hormones is going to change that. And even my husband says, how does it make them feel any better when they're looking at themselves in a mirror after a shower and they've got a beard and a vagina and they're looking at themselves in the mirror? He's like, how does that not screw with their head? Yeah. Because it will never, because it's never going to happen. And then I said to her why don't you think about freezing your eggs? And she said, I've looked into it. It's too expensive. And she said, but I don't need to anyway. And I said, what do you mean? And she goes, the endocrinologist told me that it's completely reversible and that if I want to get pregnant, I can.
The endocrinologist said that.
Yeah. And do you know what I was going to do? I was actually going to go in there as a prospective patient with a hidden camera and ask the questions. I was that angry. And the interesting thing is to find a GP to give her the hormone injections, she's had to look around because a lot of them won't do it, which I also thought was interesting.
Yeah, that surprises me.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
well, we'll let you have the last word, Monica. So is there any advice, like you've said what you thought maybe you could have done differently, but is there any advice you'd have for other mothers or fathers who are trying to help their children with this,
I mean, it's hard now because they can just go and do it themselves. You can't. That's the problem, is that your parental rights have been taken away. And if they really want to do it, they will find a way. I mean, we were actually going to move to New South Wales Highlands because my husband was offered a job and I thought, this is terrific. We'll pull them out of that environment, send them somewhere else. But we couldn't go because my husband's parents are elderly and he's an only child. We couldn't leave them. But I really did sincerely think about just taking her out of this little group and network. But the problem is that they've still got social media and they've still got access to anything. We never had all that growing up. If you wanted information, go to the library and look it up on microfiche or on something. But these days it's just all there, and do a survey online. I mean, what's wrong with me, and put in all your feelings, and it comes up. Have you thought that perhaps that you were transgender? Comes up.
I've done that. I've actually put in that I was a 15-year-old trans kid and asked for advice in Melbourne, and it's put me straight through onto the affirmation train at Royal Children's Hospital.
Oh, absolutely.
So any child that puts any, and even if I've been looking for information regarding childhood gender transition that's research based, and as soon as you put in any questions, particularly if they might expose some of the inconsistencies, something pro-trans comes up. So there's algorithms within Google and the search engines that are bringing up all the positive stuff. So the kids have got no hope.
No, they haven't. Yeah, you can find what you can get anything to argue in your favor if you put the right words in Google. And so child can say to you, oh, here's proof, and they show you a report on Google because they've put in show me positives, and it's going to come out. And this is the problem. And even on Facebook, because I've liked a few things or I've posted a few memes that would make me a TERF, I've been getting sent things, oh, you might be interested in this, and it's support for transgender people.
Yeah, I'll get them.
Yeah,
I'm in the outer burbs. Like I'm in the outer burbs, almost country, and it's crept its way out here too. It's not right through the schools like it is in the inner city. But every time I leave the house, I see a trans identifying person, and more often than not, it's girls with no breasts.
Yes.
So it can
I
creep
just
out
think
here everywhere.
Well, I did say to one of my daughters, I'm worried about my eldest because, yes, she's in a loving relationship at the moment, which my doctor thinks is really bizarre because she doesn't understand how they have heterosexual sex when one's a they and one's a boy, but they're, she said, that's just weird. And I said, I know, but, and I did say to one of my daughters, I'm worried that if they break up, that she's not going to be able to find anybody to fulfill that part of her life, that sort of,
Anyone who
current
isn't trans.
life partner.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, Mum, don't worry about that. She goes, that's not a problem. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, oh, there's all these dating sites, there's people out there. And then she told me a story of a young boy. She's just finished year 12. And there's a young boy in her year who isn't on any hormones and hasn't had any medication, but completely identifies as female and dresses female, long hair, the skimpiest dresses you've ever seen, obviously tucks really well. And I said, so how do they go at parties? I mean, who do they hook up with? Do they hook up with gay boys or straight boys or what? And she said, both. And I said, but don't the straight boys know that it's a he? And she said, yeah, probably, but they don't care because he's pretty. So
male sexuality is way weird. That's all I'm saying.
But that's what I'm saying is, like, back in our day, we wouldn't even, like, you think of Crocodile Dundee with Paul Hogan, and he's in that bar in LA, and this very tall masculine woman is chatting him up, and
that's right.
He's getting really excited, and then somebody whispers something in his ear, and he grabs her between the legs and realizes she's not a woman after all. And, he's embarrassed and sort of just walks off like it's, it's like, oh, dear, I nearly went there and I shouldn't have. But these days, the kids don't care. And so they just perpetuate the problem. And so parents trying to save kids from the medical side of things, because that's my concern. And I've said to mine, I don't care how you identify, who you date, what you call yourself, that's not a problem. I said it's the medicalisation that I'm worried about. But they don't know. The kids aren't being taught that side of it.
They're being lied to. If an endocrinologist is telling a child that testosterone is completely reversible, then they're being lied to.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I was so angry because even though my child is now 19, has some really weird thoughts and ideas on a lot of stuff, thinks that they know a lot more than they do. And my husband and I just look at each other sometimes and shake our head and think, how can you think that? Not just about transgenderism, but about a lot of things, politics, all sorts of things. And we just look at each other and go, this is bizarre what's coming out of her mouth. Because they don't, they're very easily led. Whatever the internet says or the Green Party says, that's what they believe. And
they haven't had the life experience to challenge any of that.
No, they haven't. And that's the thing. They haven't lived, and, working minimum wage and how unfair it is and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, hello, try and put 3 kids through school and pay a mortgage and, on whatever, not on doctors and lawyers' salary. I mean, life's tough out there, kid.
Yeah.
Just because you've been pandered to all your life, now reality's going to stink in, and you just got to be there to pick up the pieces. And I guess that's my advice to other parents. If you can't stop it, just let them know that you'll always be there, because I'm pretty sure it's getting to a point where we just can't stop it. And that's the scary thing is, you fight and you fight and you fight. And I'll never stop fighting.
I didn't talk to my mum for 12 months when I was about 18. I just didn't talk to her because she, upset me for something. And now that she's been gone for 20 years, I regret losing that 12 months. And I think there'll be a lot of young people who fall out with their parents over this issue, who look back and they've done differently.
But scarily, there's a lot of parents like this young boy that I mentioned before, and I reached out to his mum because I've known him since kindergarten. And I reached out to her and I said, look, if you ever want anyone to talk to or any support groups, she goes, I've got my own thank you. We're so proud of her. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for being an example of, you know, mums that can stand up to this cult, and it is a cult. There's no doubt in my mind.
Oh, absolutely. And I will tell anyone who listen. I even told a customer that I was helping yesterday at work. I deal with I'm the customer service manager at a particular place, and I was helping this couple out with something with a warranty issue, and they had a baby girl. It was about 9 weeks old, and I said, don't let them on social media. And then I gave them the whole spiel and told them my story, and I think they walked out, but they actually agreed with me. So they go, yep, no, we hear you. And I, you know, so I am very vocal, and I will tell anyone who'll listen. And I actually chose my place of work when I was offered quite a few jobs a while ago all at once, and I chose my place of work because of the ladies were my age and older and completely agreed with everything I was saying. So and that's why I'm working there. So I don't have to argue with anyone about it, because it just breaks your heart every day, even though you put on a brave face for your other kids and whatever. It's just every time I took her to work this morning, and you know the voice is breaking, and you know she has to shave, and yeah, it just you just love them so much. So
strong, my lovely. We're all, you know, our hearts go out to you. Thank you so much for coming and telling your story.
No, and
yes,
I want to appreciate you guys for getting it out there too, because so many people you talk to have got no idea. Just they don't even know what goes on. They've got no clue. They don't know about the gender clinic. They don't know that young kids could go on puberty blockers. They've got no idea. So, but if they meet me, they'll know.
Me. Well, thank you, Monica. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us.
No, that's great. I appreciate what you're doing. We've got to stop this thing.
Great. Thank you.
All right, guys.
You'll have to let yourself out. I'm sorry.
Don't let the door hit me on the way out. Hang on.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Wow. It's so hard.
Yeah.
They're so hard for the ROGD mums. It really is. Oh, no, I don't want to report Monica to Zoom. I'm learning with this tech stuff. Poor old Stasia, before she took her leave, sat with me for hours trying to go through this, and my laptops are both really old and crappy, and because I spend all my money on my kids' laptops because they need them for school. And she was so patient, but if anything made her need a holiday, it was trying to teach me how to do all this, because I'm just completely oblivious. And yeah, so you know, ranting on social media, I'm fine with that, but this tech stuff's over my head. But I'm giving it a go. But I'm learning quickly. I'm learning on the job. So yeah, it just breaks my heart to see these kids involved in this. So I was saying to Monica beforehand that you know, I was fortunate that my father-in-law came out in 2014, and also a lifelong friend of mine is transgender. So when my father-in-law came out, they sort of looked and went, oh, you're not a woman, this is ridiculous. So they've already had that background where they know that a lot of it is bullshit. And they've also met one of the true trans, or whatever they're called, you know, someone who for them was this, you know, to medically transition was really the only option that they had left. And, you know, so they've met both sides of this, the AGP who was fast-tracked and the person who took over a decade from the first visit to, you know, top surgery, double mastectomy. So, you know, I was very fortunate that you know, my kids have always known trans people, so they didn't buy into the bullshit that's out there.
Yeah.
And I think this is it. They're sold a lie. And it's a very appealing lie, you know, especially for awkward alternative, you know, gay kids, for autistic kids who are a little bit out there, you know, to have the social support, the illusion of the social support, because as we know, a lot of it's lies and it's virtue signaling. It's very appealing though. Poor kids.
I know, poor kids. I
And
do
poor
feel
mums.
very sorry for them. And poor mums. And
Yeah.
mum is just amazing.
Yeah.
Imagine
The dads
that,
are-
dropping your child off at work and them having a bit of stubble,
Yeah.
like your daughter. Just
To me, it's like having a child who's a drug abuser, someone on drugs. They think that they're, doing it to cope, but they're actually causing self-harm. And, as far as I'm concerned, someone deliberately taking those drugs without, a full medical assessment, and none of them get that. It's just, it's self-harm. Yeah. And the dads I've spoken to have just been a little bit mostly overwhelmed by it, and just left the decision making to the child and the mum. They seem to have a very standoffish approach to this whole thing. So there's less fathers speaking out, and they don't seem to be held accountable the way that mothers are.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, it's always the mother's fault, isn't it, when a child goes mad or when a child has success? It's, it's always the mother's fault. Like, that's even
Like it's Terf's fault.
Yeah, well, even, the whole early thinking about autism was that it was a refrigerator mum. Remember that caused it, So, yeah, but
Well, they genetically it comes from the father, and I only discovered that a couple of years ago. So yeah, all the different things that were causing autism, like vaccine, I've heard them all, and they eventually found out that it's a gene that's more likely to come from the father. They've reduced it down to the gene, and that's only available in a man. So there you go.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's in there on the online somewhere. Yeah. So do we have any other news? I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, I think
Shout out to my trans activist buddies, Beck Shaw and Amy Sargent. If you've managed to sit all the way through this video, let me know. It will provide me with hours of entertainment. Yeah, if you know of any stories that we need to cover, we're always happy to take tips from our viewers. So, if there's anything in particular that you'd like us to look at that's, based around Australia, let us know.
I just remembered that we should shout out to Jessica Hoyle with her My Cause fundraiser. She's off to the federal court for a judicial review of the TASCAT decision, which upheld the human rights decision that lesbians have to include men on the basis of their gender identity at lesbian-only social events. So yeah, she's trying to raise money, and she's got, if you Google My Cause Jessica Hoyle, then you can donate. Anything you can donate would be really welcome.
Cool. And yeah, congratulations to Michelle from Women's Action Group for having a successful Speakers Corner last weekend.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
So, yeah, little Melbourne practice run for when Kelly J comes out. So yeah, well done, Michelle and the WAG group. Good on yous. Yep, I think that's about it. Thanks for watching, everybody, and hopefully we'll be back next week. Thanks, Jasmine.
Okay, thanks, Ange. See ya.
Catch you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Ah.